a 9-time national champion as a student athlete and head coach, 33 years at the helm of Denison University men's and women's swimming. Head coach Gregg Parini is the gold standard. But today we discuss what he has done to build the legacy he has, the foundation that those banners have been hung upon, and what he looks forward to about the challenges of coaching this next generation of student athletes. We use words like honesty, trust, and empathy as we explore how to find true success. So bring it in, huddle up, episode 7, Family on 3, with Gregg Parini.
Family on 3, 1, 2, 3, family!
And it's when we were talking about community, and one of the big things that on this and in the conversations I've had with people, community is a big piece of it. And you've obviously been a staple in this community for, forever. I pulled up your bio and realized you're in your 33rd year at Denison.
Yeah.
And my first question to you is, what is it about, we'll start with Denison specifically, but even the Granville community, what is it about this community that has kept you here and doing this and grinding this for 33 years?
Well, I think there's a couple different, it's pretty layered response, but first and foremost, this is where our kids were born. This is home for us. Neither my wife or I are native to Ohio. I'm from Northern Michigan. My wife is from Western Massachusetts, and and so Ohio and specifically Granville's our adopted home. And it's I think the key word is community. It's just that there is a sense of connectedness here that surpasses pretty much all the other places that we've lived before. And so it's an opportunity for not only us as parents, but I think most importantly, it's been an experience for us to witness our children grow up in a community where there are a lot of great examples and a lot of people who've made investments into them. We've got 6 sons, and it takes a village to raise a young man these days. And we've been fortunate all the way from Andrew down to Simon to have a lot of positive role models, not only through our church, but through the schools and through their various activities, including most notably athletics, for them to grow up. And so we're small enough that people knew us and that they took a vested interest in what they were doing. And for us as parents, our children have always been our highest priorities, and has been surrounding them in an atmosphere and an environment that would bring out the best in them. Professionally, I've had my opportunities to move on.
Sure.
Lots of phone calls, lots of interviews, lots of like I said, opportunities. And it always boiled down to this: is I think you can be you can coach pretty much anywhere in the country, but you can only be a good parent in so many, just because of the pressures that come along with that profession. And I grew up in a situation where my father was not always available because of his work. And I made a decision a long time ago that if I was going to coach, I wanted to be in a setting and in a community where I could continue to be involved in my children's lives. And Denison has afforded me that opportunity. Granville's provided that larger environment for me. And so it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been hard to stay. Let me put it that way. As tempting as some of those offers were professionally, they were always, those offers were always surpassed by just the sense of community, Granville, Denison. And so it's, like I said, it has not been hard to stay.
Sure. That's a good way to put it. The not hard to stay. And it's, I love the idea of looking at, I think too often we forget the big picture when it comes to the professional choices. And you chase the shiny things.
Sure.
And yeah, with the idea of, it takes a village, especially, as your kids are young and growing up. And as, we talked about, I'm in a similar boat now. And, I can't imagine being somewhere else,
right,
with different people helping us. What over these years, what is, and we'll kind of get more specifically with your coaching experience, what have you seen as some of the biggest changes with regards to how you develop, even in your program, community or culture, whichever word you want to use for it, what are some of the things you've seen that you've had to change and adapt over that 33-year career?
Well, I'm still learning. Just as soon as you seem to figure it out, something changes, and I think that has a lot to do with the clientele that comes through your door. I think we're working with a particularly interesting generation of students and student athletes right now. Some of whom are, I would categorize my own children fall into. So I use my own children as yardsticks for that experience. But we're dealing with the post 9/11 generation here that has had some really unique challenges to it. And despite I've often considered myself a pretty bright and intuitive person, but I've had some real blind spots because so much of my coaching and teaching experience has been forged in the fires of my own learning as a student athlete, and I've really had to stretch myself professionally to get in tune with the current. And I don't think it's a generational thing. I'm going to be 60 years old this summer, which is kind of mind blowing to me. And it's one of those benchmarks that you always just kind of like, oh, that'll never happen. But here I am on the
Right.
threshold. And I don't think it's an age thing so much as it's an experience thing. And I think if I want to remain an effective coach, teacher, and mentor, I've got to make sure that I can identify with the struggles that they've gone through. And I think the struggles and some of the challenges and opportunities that the current generation of students and student athletes are doing are really unique, something that we've never seen before. I mean, again, they're post 9/11, they've lived through the 2008 recession, and now they're dealing with this. And
Right.
that, this whole pandemic and the containment order, and those are three fairly unique events. I'm a child of the civil rights movement. I'm a child of the Vietnam War and Watergate. Those were my three significant ones. But you know, you can say that, and those things were my formative experience. But these are very different experiences than what I experienced. And so I think if I'm going to stay relevant, I've got to get in tune with those needs, and then those needs are what really drive the culture that you're trying to develop. The culture has to be based off of those needs, not off of some preconceived notion of what you think those needs will be. And it's been a real education for me just in the last 18 to 24 months as I've tried to grapple with some of those struggles, not only some of the things that my own children have been working with, but my students and my athletes and things like that. And so it's something that we hammer on every single day. We address it. We've gone so far as to actually, within our program, hire a director of team culture of development. And it's a young lady that swam for me and now has her PhD, Dr. Katie Sprague, and she lives in Columbus and works with, has been doing this for a long, long time. And she's bringing her expertise to the program to help us forge out some, work through some of those challenges. And so the cultural piece is fundamental. The coaching, the training components of what we do are changing a little bit, but the cultural piece is moving much more quickly, I think, in some ways. So
Sure. And with the culture piece and with those changes, and you see the dynamics with, as you talked about, with today's college age athlete and social media and mental health. I mean, all these, they're not, I mean, social media is new, but the mental health piece is on the forefront, obviously.
yeah.
Stepping back to, I mean, even if you go back to your years swimming at Kenyon and being a part of the start of that dynasty, before coming and building your own at Denison. On the flip side, when you look at the swimmers you swam with, the best ones you've coached, what are some of the qualities either in the individual or in the culture of those two programs that you've been a part of that have remained constant throughout all of these changes? What are some of the benchmarks that you've or foundational pieces you've leaned on?
Well, I think, a number of years ago, I had the good fortune of being challenged to write a manifesto, my own personal and professional manifesto, which is developed into kind of our guidebook for our program. And it really falls on 8 different principles that we feel are, kind of foundational to what we're doing. And a lot of that is rooted in my my experience as a younger athlete, not only in high school, I swam for Butch Briggs at East Grand Rapids. We won. It's arguably one of the most successful high school swimming programs in the history of the United States. Then I go to Kenyon and get a chance to swim for Jim Steen there, and their legacy is secure. And then coming here, so I was smart enough to build off of what I had learned before and take what I could from those programs. And I think it really boils down to issues like honesty and integrity, accountability, self-discipline, humility, camaraderie and loyalty, and resilience. It really gets down to those kind of qualities that I think are foundational to the development of not only a good student athlete but a good person. And I think you've got to, I think those are the things that we lean hard on here, and what, at least as a program and as a coach, we consider non-negotiables in what we're trying to do, and those are foundational pieces, because as the old statement says, culture will eat strategy for lunch every time. I mean, you can have the best X's and O's out there, but if your team doesn't believe in what you're doing, then it doesn't matter. Likewise, I think you can walk out on the field or out on the pool deck with a pretty mediocre training plan, but if the kids are bought into it, they can make great things of it. It's interesting. I had a great experience not too long ago where I was frustrated by one of my athletes who I consider to be a really elite athlete, and I was watching him in practice go up and down the pool, and some people might frame him as an underachieving. I don't necessarily like that, but something was getting in the way, and I was pretty frustrated with the fact that he was just not performing at a level that I thought he was capable of performing at. I was talking to a colleague, and I was sharing my frustration, and a really brilliant. He shared a really brilliant. He goes, "Well, maybe he doesn't trust you enough to go fast." And I said, and I said, "Wait, what?" He goes, "He probably doesn't trust you enough to go fast." And he goes, "Tell me about your relationship, the trusting relationship you have with what level of trust." And it really boiled down to that, is that I had a young man who really didn't believe in what we were doing, nor did he believe in me necessarily. And so we've been working it. And the more time I have reflected on that comment, the more I realize that trust is foundational to everything. If you have an athlete or a person who trusts you, they're gonna give everything that they have to what you're doing. But if they don't trust you, that's like a three-legged chair. It's gonna be unstable, and you're gonna have a really hard time getting the results out of that performance that you really want to. And so I think trust is foundational. It starts at the top, and it's got to work its way down. And I have, that's probably one of the biggest pieces that I've been working on recently. It's just that whole trust issue with my athletes.
Well, I love the fact it's like you were reading my notes, as I have honesty and trust circled before we even started talking, because one of the things is, as I've had these conversations with other coaches, and even with my work with the lacrosse program at Dennis and all those are the two words that just keep coming up over and over again. And the other piece you said there, which is a perfect transition to this, is it starts at the top and works its way down.
Right.
And you've been fortunate enough, I know, just, from me watching your program, not from too far away, but, your swimmers, they're bought in. Let's put it that way. They carry themselves in a way that they understand the expectation. They're willing to put in the work, but they also, at least it appears from afar, that they self-govern, for lack of a better term. I've been in the pool area when they're meeting in a huddle, and I'm just kind of laughing, going, "Yeah, Gregg doesn't need to be here. Like, this is impressive." But that does come from the top down. And in Division III, a lot of times you have changeover in your staff. Mm-hmm. And how have you found your own personal leadership qualities and ability to mentor and develop such high-level assistant coaches that have been able to take your manifesto, your foundational principles, buy into them, develop them, and then be a part of that group that helps build it. Because as you said, even in coaching, it takes a village. And I know you've had tremendous assistant coaches over the years that I've had, the fortune of being around. But how do you develop those qualities with them?
I think, I think there's a couple. And one, we talk about it. I mean, we reference these things all the time in staff meetings. We reference them daily. I think it comes through communication and sharing from me to them, a willingness to be vulnerable with them, to share with them, not only the things the things that I think are key to being successful, but also I think the things that are key to being unsuccessful. We talk a lot about success in our program, but we also talk a lot about failure. And those are two sides of the same coin, and there's a very thin line between the two. But I've been very fortunate to have a very stable coaching staff recently. I mean, I've got Callan who's just wrapped up his 8th year, and Russ who's finished up his 7th, and Kim who's wrapped up her 6th. And I've got Amanda Schneider who's been with me for now, almost 20 years. And then I've got Bill Mason as another part-time, assistant coach who, while he doesn't know much about swimming, Bill and I are cut in many ways from the same cloth. Bill's in his 80s. I knew Bill when he was coaching my son Joe in lacrosse on the high school team, and I saw what a positive impact he had with Joe. Joe's reputation, his nickname was Volcano Joe. And I just remember I had never met Bill Mason before this. And I remember Bill helping Joe through a really tough moment in a game against New Albany. And Joe had taken a penalty and the coach had removed him from the game. And Joe goes down to the end of the bench and is just, kind of losing his mind.
The volcano.
The volcano erupted. And then I watched this old man just walk down the bench and take Joe by the arm, and they walked down the sideline. And within 5 minutes, he had Joe regrouped, recentered, and Joe got back out on the field and played probably one of the best games I've ever seen him play. So I've surrounded myself with really good people, I think, who generally have a good moral compass to begin with and who really want to learn. And I've had stability within the coaching staff. And so, when you have that kind of stability, it makes it a lot easier because, we're familiar with each other. It doesn't mean that all my assistant coaches have gotten it equally or at the same pace, though. But it's important that they do get it. And I think my philosophy is not only with my coaches, but with my athletes, is when you're unsure of how to bring them along, just drown them in culture. Just not necessarily force feed them, but you surround them in every possible way with culture. And it hasn't always been this way. I think, I've done a lot of reading over the years, and Phil Jackson's book, Sacred Hoops, I think is one of my favorite books. And he talks about the 7-year cycle. And I don't necessarily get everything that Jackson was talking about in that book, but he talked about the evolution of programs, especially like when he was with the Bulls, when he was with the Lakers. And he always looked at, that the human dynamic goes through kind of an evolution every 7 years, and that you can expect some type of significant growth opportunity every 7 years when you're working within a group. And I can't necessarily tell you it's been exactly every 7 years that we've seen some type of significant leap forward or evolution in our program, but it rounds out to about 7 years. And I would say about 7 years ago, right around the about 2012, we had just finished winning our 2nd national title, when we kind of experienced this real sense of accountability with the group. It was in that 11, 12, 13 era when we were first winning our first couple national titles, where you could just sense the guys were buying in at a very different level. And again, I think it's just they started to trust the process, trust themselves, trust me. And but I think with the assistant, and it starts with me. And I think the other piece of this, Adam, and I almost forgot to mention this, I think it's just really important as a head coach that I live into these principles every single day. I mean, I've got to model that behavior. I've got to model the loyalty. I've got to model the trust, the honesty, the integrity, the self-discipline, the loyalty, the resilience. If I don't model those things, I can't expect my athletes to do it. And I remember my father, who was one of my great mentors. He came from nothing, started this aerospace business, built it into a pretty significant entity up in Michigan. He used to tell me all the time that, that a fish either swims or rots from the head down. And that's something that I've taken to heart. It starts with me. And then just, if like I said, just, drown them in culture. And from that point on, so it's not nothing too significant so much as it is just constant.
Right.
And yeah, I don't think there's a magic pill out there so much as it is a constant feeding of culture to your team and your coaches. And then hopefully they will buy in at some point.
Yeah, and the consistency piece, I think, when you look at, when you look at any sport and any program, you could argue that you've been a part of two of the most, at Kenyon as a swimmer and at Denison as a coach, of two of the most consistently successful programs in college sports, which is a very bold statement, but it's a fact. With that comes unbelievable expectations.
Yeah.
It comes naturally, I would guess, with that comes angst and almost the idea of, if there's not another banner hanging, it's a failure. And I just know that Kenyon swimming was like that. And I know that outside of maybe your bubble, Denison swimming is seen like that
Sure.
it's a banner or bust.
Right.
When you talk about culture, how do you approach, and you mentioned this in your last comments, how do you approach your student athletes around not worrying about the banner and worrying about the performance that will get to the banner, if that makes sense? And the idea that there's still a chance that you're going to do your best and it's not going to be good enough. How do
Sure.
you approach that? Because I think that that's a skill set. I even look at my own children at 4, 6, and 8.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that idea of like, your best doesn't guarantee anything, but
Right.
your expectations at Denison swimming are, as high as they can get. How do you approach that within your culture?
Well, I think we're open about it. We talk about it. How are we going to measure success this year? And I think as coaches and I think as athletes, you have to be really, there's almost an infinite number of yardsticks out there by which we can measure our success, our performance. I've got this yardstick that's in my office, and it sits on top of my filing cabinet, and it actually sits right under. I've got a couple national championship team trophies sitting on my filing cabinet, but underneath it is this yardstick that a friend of mine stained in a different color, and all it says on is a different yardstick, and it's to remind me that you have to choose wisely what yardstick you're going to use to measure your success. I think that not only comes personally, but it also comes professionally, and also comes from a team standpoint. And so I think very early on, we have to clarify for ourselves what yardstick we're going to use every year to measure our success. I swam on, I was a member of Kenyon's first 3 national championship teams. And I can tell you the first 2 that we won were magical years. Oh my God, it was just like touch the water, go fast. And then I remember we went to Washington and Lee for my senior year. And I remember we went to the meet and we won the meet in like such dominating fashion. We won everything. And it was like one of the most miserable experiences of my life because we all swam slow. We were just so talented. It would be like the Chicago Bulls going out and just, thumping some average, high school team, and we won the NBA championship. But but we didn't swim well. And it was really important, that it was an important moment for me when I realized that it was much more than just simply winning that fueled me personally. And so I think for me, again, it starts with me. I have to convey to the team what's important. I have to convey to the team how I measure their progress as student athletes. Is it simply getting to the top of the podium, or is it about performing at your very best, which in our sport means, did you swim faster? Did you dive better than you ever have before? And so I think we just have, again, it's that consistent message to the group this is how we're going to measure our success. Now, that's not to say that winning isn't important. We think winning is, because and I think culturally, we value winning. Otherwise, we wouldn't be keeping score.
Right.
But if that's all we're about, then I think we're really missing out on the much bigger prize. I know one of my best friends who passed away in a really tragic car accident a number of years ago was silver medalist in the 400 IM at the Olympic Games, and his college teammate actually beat him. This is Eric Namesnick. And Snick was one of the greatest people I've ever known, and he got beat by Tom Dolan in the 400 IM in Atlanta in '96. And it's one of the great races of all time. And I remember talking to Snick afterwards. I said, "Were you disappointed with second?" He goes, "Yeah, for a minute." But then I realized just that, how fast I'd gone, and I broke the world record, and it was the best swim of my life. And I'm just going to choose to focus in on that, rather than I wasn't the first to lose, but I was the first to get second place. And there's some real wisdom in that. And I think it's a question of being smart and wise about how we measure ourselves. And I think if all we're doing is just trying to get to the top of the podium, we're going to miss out on so much more that is important. And this is where I think, again, 60 trips around the sun and life experiences really help my team.
Sure.
I've been a part of some. Somebody asked me the other day in an interview, said, like, what's one of the most satisfying years you ever had as a coach? And I remember taking a team of Denison men's swimmers to St. Louis, Missouri, and we got seventh place. We got seventh place at NCAA's, and it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had with the team, because they swam out of their minds, and they had fun, and they just swam beautifully. We didn't have the talent to win, but my God, they were on it. And for me, they were the best team at the meet. Conversely, I've been a part of some teams that we won in 2016, for instance, and that was a good win for us in Greensboro, but it wasn't a satisfying one because we just didn't swim fast.
Yeah.
We walked off the deck with number one, but we left we left something in the pool. We just did not swim well. So I've been on both sides of it. And I think for us, ultimately just boils down to, are we performing at our best? Because that's where the growth is. That's the indication that we have improved and that we're moving forward. The wins don't necessarily show that.
Well, and I think I love that. And I think that you have such a unique swimming itself. Actually is similar to, golf or maybe even track and field, where you have the individual and team components. And as a guy that's grown up in team sports and coaching and playing, like I can't imagine managing the culture where it's individual and team combined. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, and I don't know this, and this is me just being naive, in swimming, have you seen, or is it a challenge to have, individuals that are elite and a team aspect that might not be elite, and keeping those components together? Does that make sense? Where you have someone that's pursuing, an individual national title while the team's pursuing a team national title or diving. Like, how do you manage those pieces? Because it's so unique. It doesn't you mentioned Phil Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Phil Jackson, Michael Jordan wasn't going for an individual NBA championship while the Bulls were going for a team one. How do you look at that?
Well, our sport is remarkably challenging. This is a really hard sport. Swimming is really hard. It's because we're so training intensive. I mean, we've got our faces in the water nearly 20 hours a week. We're looking at the bottom of the pool. You have to be very comfortable with yourself. This is a really hard thing to do, and we're doing it morning and afternoons. It's 10 workouts a week, and we are big fans, big believers in the concept of synergy, where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And there are a few lone wolves out there who can do this by themselves. There are a few. The guy who comes to mind is Alexander Popov, the Russian rocket, who trained pretty much by himself with a private coach down in Australia after Glasnost and the wall came down. And he's one of the few guys who could go out in a non-team setting and bring out the very best in himself. But we realize here, at least at Denison, we've got a few. We're more mortal here than we are with a guy like Popoff. That we're going to be much better together than we could ever be by ourselves, and that we feed off each other's energies and successes. And I have on occasion had that lone wolf who just didn't quite get the team idea or the team concept, but it generally doesn't play well here on our team, and it doesn't last long. The person either ends up leaving or they morph into a team player. And I've seen some remarkably talented, self-driven, non-team oriented people come into our program who within a year like it's all about team. It's about the team. And I can't think of, well, like I said, Popoff is one of those lone wolves who could train and compete by himself. I think the only thing harder than doing that would be training with a group of people that really didn't give a hoot about the team. We're really fortunate to put team first here. And so when we're running out of gas in practice, as the kids are instructed, if you're getting tired in practice, just all I want you to do is stop, look to your right and look to your left. Sometimes you don't have enough energy to do it for yourself, but you always got enough energy to do it for your mate. We had a really fascinating situation back in 2016. I was just referencing that national championship. And we had a remarkable Friday night at that championship. We went out and won a very hard fought 800 free relay that night. Johns Hopkins and Denison went up and down the pool, stroke for stroke, over the 800 yards. And we didn't take the lead until the last turn. And our anchor leg got his hand to the wall first. And it was an unbelievable performance. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. And we got on the bus to go back to the hotel, and our guys were dead tired. You could tell they're exhausted and emotionally spent. And so it's interesting. That same night, one of our former swimmers, a guy by the name of Jeff Skladzian, who is a Navy SEAL, came to watch the meet. It was the first time he had been to a national championship since he had graduated from Denison. And Jeff had been on a number of deployments and had been in some pretty hairy situations. And I was talking to Jeff after Friday night session, and he goes, "You guys look tired." And I said, "They are tired." And he goes, "Would you mind if I had breakfast with the team tomorrow morning before we head over to the pool?" Because we knew the meet was going to come down to Saturday morning's performance. It was all going to come down to that one session. And so Jeff followed us into breakfast, met us for breakfast on Saturday morning. And after we ate breakfast, I introduced him to the team. And Jeff got up and he talked about a moment in his career where he was caught in a firefight, and people around him had been wounded. He was not in a good place himself, and he was scared. And this is one of his first commands. And he knew that if they stayed in their foxholes, that they were going to die. And Jeff goes, "I was too scared to get out of the foxhole myself. But then I looked to my right and I looked to my left, and I knew I could do it for them." And so I got everybody up and we got out of there and we got out safely. So he shared that story with our guys that morning. He goes, "Guys, you're in that same foxhole right now. And I know you're tired going out there this morning. You might not be able to do it for yourself, but you can do it for each other." And that's just been kind of the Denison ethos since, we've always preached the team there. Just because we don't pass a ball around or hit a puck back and forth, this is as much a team sport as anything I've ever experienced. And I played baseball, football, basketball. I played them all, played water polo. But this is a team sport just simply because we feed off each other's energy, and we know we're better together than we could ever be by ourselves. And so it's not it's not a hard thing to sell simply because of the amount of stress that we put on each other and the amount of reliance that we put on each other to help each other up. I mean, if one of us falls down, we're there to pick them up. That's just how it goes.
I got goosebumps while you told that story, by the way. That story's incredible.
It's intense.
But I think that it's the look to the left and look to the right piece, I think is something that is huge. And I think it transcends sport. I think what you're teaching there is, it's what we're going through right now. It's, walk out on the sidewalk and look at the person walking down the sidewalk to the left and to the right, and you're helping them and you're hoping they help you.
Yeah. We went through, we went through that, we had NCAA's cut off 5 days before we were supposed to go. And that was one, I mean, we've been through some pretty tough moments. I wouldn't say that was the hardest thing we've ever been through, but it ranks up there in probably the top five, canceling the season and cutting some seniors careers short. The one thing that we've been talking to them a lot about is that, don't look at this as having NCAA having been taken away from you, but you having had the opportunity to give something back to the people who are most vulnerable in our community. And if you can look at it as something that you've gifted to someone else, it'll feel a lot better than if you feel like you've been robbed of an opportunity. And that's not an easy transition for anybody at any age. But I think it takes a certain amount of grace to get there. But I do know that if the swimmers and the divers can frame it that way, that it will go a long way into helping them heal and feel like they've made a difference in things. And so I think it does get down to us looking out for each other and seeing how our actions have the power to impact the people around us.
I couldn't agree more. And you had shared on social media the video from Michigan's swim program with that message, and I couldn't retweet it and post it enough. It's such a great reminder that, not that sports are, not that it's inconsequential, but that the ability to reframe what's going on with just a few simple words can completely change your outlook on it. Because I was going to ask you about those final days. I mean, I remember sitting in the meeting room talking about the lacrosse season with Sarah Lee, and while she's talking to us, I refreshed Twitter and spring championships were canceled. And I'm looking across the table at Peter Pitroff, one of our seniors, who's going to break the all-time scoring. I mean, and the greatest kid. And I'm just thinking, your career's over, right like that. And with us, it's been over these last couple of weeks of reframing with our players. And I was going to ask you, in this time that you've had away and your time to reflect. And I talked to Mike Deegan, the baseball coach Denison, about this on a previous episode. If, you would be looking at this completely differently if this was year 3 instead of year 33. In that time, as you've, matured as a coach and developed, if you were talking to a young head coach out there right now, what would be the advice that you would give someone in any sport? It doesn't have to be swimming, but to help navigate some of these waters with these young men and women, because especially in a sport like swimming, where it is so intense with training, that to just have the rug pulled out is, whether you're winning a national title or not, it's devastating. How would you look, even if, what advice would you give your 3-year experience self, if you could?
It's a great question. And it's one that I'm not sure I got a great answer for, but I lean hard on, I had the opportunity as a very young coach to sit with Sparky Anderson, the old Cincinnati, Detroit Tiger baseball manager.
Sure.
And had an opportunity, he was at a conference, and it was a coaches conference, and I got a chance to sit in a hotel lobby with him. And he was just like the most personable guy ever. And, Sparky loved to talk. And it was, and I remember him saying something that has stuck with me to this day. I don't remember much else about talking with him, but he always said, Coach, it's never about you. It's about the players. And so if you can put their needs in front of your own, then generally speaking, you're going to be well off. And I think as a young coach, we get caught up in our own stuff. We get caught up in our own needs. We get caught up in our own wants, selfishly or unselfishly, we do. But I think the wisdom that I got from Sparky, and that I think that I heard was echoed by Doc Councilman years later when I was talking, Doc became one of my mentors, the great coach at Indiana, as Doc and I got to know each other a little bit better. Doc always said, it's always about the student first, and put their needs in front of your own, and don't get caught your. And I think most young coaches, everybody wants to succeed. Everybody feels like they have to win in order to prove themselves, when in fact, I think what we have to do is be there for the student athlete, be there for the student, to prove ourselves. And so it's not easy. It's really murky. It's really tough. But I think as long as we're putting the needs of the young people in front of our own, then generally we're going to position ourselves in a positive sort of way. And that'd be my advice to the young coach, is just, don't worry about yourself so much, worry about the kids around you,
Sure.
and help them through it. And helping them through it, then generally speaking, you help yourself through it. And, but I think as coaches, then after you've done all that, after you've poured your heart and soul into these kids, then you go to your room and you have a good cry. Because that's what I did. I mean, the first several days, weeks, were just about connecting with the kids and making sure that I was available to them and helping them through, and still am. I've still got a couple athletes out there who are really, really struggling with all of this. Just wasn't on their radar screen, wasn't part of the reality. And but I had plenty of my own moments where I just had to sit down and just have it out with myself a little bit. And so yeah, there's just there's no magic formula other than just to be honest with yourself and the people around you. But I think as young coaches, I think any coach, I think if we're good at what we do, we're available to them, and do our best to help them through it.
No, I love that. And meeting kids where they are, because to your point, I think, and I've learned it with my own, is simply even asking, how you doing? What are you feeling? What is during these weeks, you referenced the difficulty of the start, and it's still difficult. And, for all of us that are, competitive, we miss being around our teams and doing what we do. But what is something that you have, for lack of a better term, what is something you've discovered over these last 2 months, be it with the free time that you've had, being home more, all those things, that is maybe an interest or something that you've had a chance to just step back and be like, wow, I can focus a little bit more on this because I don't have 50 swimmers staring at the bottom of a pool at 4:30 in the morning, because I've stepped away and reflected a little.
Well, I have always led a little bit of a monastic life anyway. It's just my nature. I'm fairly introverted to begin with, which a lot of people, it throws people off because I'm large and I have a large, deep voice, and people think anybody who's large and deep voice is kind of the ogre. But actually, I'm okay with being by myself a lot, and the time, the downtime has really given me a chance to kind of spend extra time with our one son, who remains at home, who's 15 and finding his way, and also supporting my wife. And so we've had a lot of quality time that way. But, the one thing that I've always done over the summers is made sure that I've always used the summers as a chance to refresh and regroup. I'm not a coach who can coach 11, 12 months a year. I know that about myself. I think just because I put so much energy into the season that when the season is over, I generally have a breakdown. And the wheels come off the cart and I'm a mess for a while. And for me, one of the best things I can do for myself is to work on we have 6 acres here out on Loudon Street. And I get a chance to just kind of plow into the property and work with the dirt, and do a lot of gardening, a lot of weeding, and a lot of trimming of trees, and and just sitting outside and being outside. And I that's how I spend much of my summers, and it's just good reflective time, and it gives me a chance to kind of rejuice and re-energize. And I think if I was a coach who had coached 11 months a year and was doing the camp circuit, I mean, I admire the people who do it, but I can't do it. I don't think I would have lasted this long. I think I've had to pace myself well, and picking and choosing my moments during the summers just to kind of stay healthy and to keep my sanity a little bit. So like I said, for me, being monastic is not necessarily hard, because it kind of comes by nature. So I think what I've been doing, I got a jump start on it maybe a little bit just because of the containment order, but being outside and working with the dirt's my favorite thing to do. We've got chickens here too, so I work with the chickens, and we have a good time.
That's awesome. See, this is great. I've known you for a long time, and I had no idea you had
Yeah,
6 acres and chickens,
chicken.
um,
Yeah,
or that you're an introvert.
yeah,
Um, I've seen on social media you guys are doing well in the recruiting game.
yeah.
The last question I'll ask you before I get to my final one is: as you've built your culture, as you've developed your leadership voice as the head of this program, what in recruiting, what do you feel has been, whether it's Denison as a school or your program, what's the piece that you look for in a student athlete as a match for your program and for the college, that you have been able to find that groove, and bring these student athletes in that, they might not know exactly what they're getting into because they're still 17 and 18 years old, but
Right.
they're ready to get into it.
Well, I think the vetting process is huge. You've got to identify, not only talented young men and women, but people that want to get on the same bus as you are. It gets down to getting the right people on the bus. And we talk a lot. I've shared this probably 100 times or more than that, 1,000 times with the recruits. I said, I don't expect you to have world-class talent here at Denison, but I do expect world-class effort. And it just really boils down to that, as somebody who has an open mind to the idea that I'm going to work extremely hard. I'm going to get pushed in ways that are not always going to be comfortable, but always with the idea that personal growth comes first. So we're trying to identify those people that really want to have an exceptional experience, that really isn't very much driven by their talent so much as it's going to be driven by their efforts. And if there's one thing I think that characterizes all of our kids, especially those who have really distinguished themselves, it's an openness to the possibilities. What happens if I totally buy into this? If I give myself over to this completely, I'm open to some really exciting things happen. And that just come and the only way you can figure that out is spending time with a recruit, and having conversations with them, and asking them about tough moments, and talk about good moments. And you know there's a series of questions that I ask the recruits that helps me get to that. But it really just gets down to trying to find young men and young women who are willing to push themselves in a way that is truly exceptional. Because if you're going to have an exceptional experience, then you have to be willing to do exceptional things. And we make no apologies about that. We're unapologetic about our commitment to that. And I have found that most young men and young women right now these days are looking for that. They're looking for something exceptional. They want somebody.
Yes.
They want somebody to invest in them, somebody who believes in them, somebody who can give them the tools to have an amazing experience. I am not down on this generation at all. I love this generation of student athletes. They are high energy, they're high caliber, they're very, very smart. Um, they sometimes are a little lost. And I think if you can give them a direction and then give them the resource to and show them that you care and that you believe in them, some amazing things can happen. And so that for me is what we're looking for, is people who are just eager to grow and do exceptional things to get there.
I love that. I love the max effort piece. There's a clip I saw of Gino Oriema talking to his UConn women's basketball team at a practice, and they weren't practicing very hard. And he brought him into a huddle. He said, "I just want you to be aware that we don't coach effort.
Right.
If you're coming to UConn to play basketball, I don't have to coach the effort."
Right.
And it was I remember seeing that and just thinking, like, yeah, that's it. He's recruiting based on that's what you're bringing. That's a given.
Well,
We're gonna fine tune it.
yeah. We had a young man a number of years ago, Darius Gregg, who was he's the lone Olympian we've ever had come out of our program. Darius swam for Lithuania in 2004, and came out of Chicago, Illinois, and found his way to the Lithuanian national team that ended up silver medalist in the 400 freestyle relay. And I remember Darius came back after that experience and was sitting down with the men's team. And I remember, very similar to what you're sharing there, is he challenged me. He goes, whose job is it to motivate you? He's asking the team this, and the kids are like, well, it's coach's job. And he went off for the next 90 minutes on how that is the last thing a coach should have to be doing, is motivating you. It's that if coach has to motivate you, then you're already lost. And it strikes to what you mentioned with Ariyama, and it underscores what we're doing here. I mean, if you don't have the motivation, this is not the program for you. So we're just looking for that highly motivated kid. And, you know, and that means we're going to take some chances on some kids. You know, we're taking chances on some kids that other coaches just would not look at. But they've come to my office, and we sat down and we vetted them, and, you know, and next thing you know is they're making it to nationals, and they're scoring points, and they're doing some things in the classroom or in the laboratory that you're like, holy cow, who would have ever believed this would happen? I was like, well, we did. We thought this could happen with this young man. So there you go.
And some of those are the best stories. But the last question I ask him, everything that you've talked about, you could peel out of swimming and just write as, you know, these make quality human beings. Sure. These are the qualities we need in our employees and our first responders and everybody that is helping us right now. If we could only give these qualities to everybody. And it leads to my kids are so tired of hearing me use this mantra, but it's like become my family value system is, you know, just be a good teammate. Yeah. And, you know, it's, and what that means, and, you know, teaching them that it's, you know, your classmates at school or your neighbor or your family, you know, you have to be a good teammate. And what does that mean? And so I ask everyone, and I can't tell you how pumped I am to hear your answer, but if you had to finish this sentence, how do you finish the sentence? To be a good teammate is to.
Well, I don't want to disappoint you. Pressure's on. No, so many things come to mind in that. But to be a good teammate, okay, I think you have to be a good shepherd. That means you have to look out for the people around you. There's so many layers to that, but it means that you're in a service mindset, that you're putting other people's needs before your own, and you stand by people in the tough times and in the good times. I've just seen that time and time again in our program, where we've had young men and young women stand by each other through some really, really challenging times. And that to me is the most affirming thing, that we're doing things right in our program. And so you just look out for everybody. You look to your right, you look to your left, and you look out for the people around you. So
just so you know, I'll be taking the look to your left and look to the right for the remainder of my coaching career.
I borrowed it from our Navy SEAL, and I gladly give it to you.
That's awesome. Well, Coach, I can't thank you enough, man. It's been a pleasure. I've had the chance to obviously watch your program over the years, and to say that you've set the bar, I mean, at Denison in Division III athletics in all these ways. But I think that, to me, what I've seen from your student athletes when I was a student at Denison, knowing swimmers, and as a coach there, it's very obvious why. And you talk about it's a top-down thing, and the culture that you've built is truly second to none. So I thank you for spending the time chatting about it. There's so much valuable information. It's incredible, selfishly, even just for myself. But stay safe during this. Enjoy those 6 acres.
I will.
Because I know you're itching to get to the pool. Come on, man.
You got to get you and the family out here to play with our chickens.
Oh yeah, don't worry. My 4-year-old will probably try to take one home.
Well, if you ever want a kitten, let me know. We have all sorts of feral cats on the property too.
We're good.
Adam, thank you very much.
All right, man. Hey, stay safe. Best to the family. And
Okay.
we'll be in touch.
God bless. Thanks, Adam.
Take care. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Family on 3. What a great conversation with Coach Parini today. So much stands out there, and it's certainly obvious why he has had the sustained success that he has had over these past 33 years. But what really stood out to me in that conversation was the consistency that he preached, the consistency of living the values from his players, from his coaching staff, but also how he understood that it started at the top with him, and he has to be at his best in order to demand that of others. It was an awesome conversation, awesome insight, and like I said, it's crystal clear why he's had the success that he has. If you think that this could be beneficial to anyone you know, feel free to share this podcast link. Encourage others to tune in and check this out. We'd love to hear your feedback on what you learned from the show. And as always, stay safe, be a good teammate.